So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the P&O sackings. Are they a result of Brexit and any kind of deregulation? The short answer is no, it's not. The reality isn't down to any kind of deregulation. For the most part, it's down to already pre-existing weak UK labour laws. And the simple fact is, I watched someone else's video on it. They said this was absolutely to do with Brexit in a previous video. They've kind of backtracked on that statement just a bit, and that's why it's important for people to reveal their sources. I looked in the description of his video. He offered a source from something the union said back during the referendum, didn't offer anything else. Not going to mention his name, but that's why it's I got quite annoyed because I spoke to someone else. I said, someone who knows a lot more than me, and I said, look, is this the case? Because I've not heard of any deregulation, and if that was the case, something slipped past me anyways, which is pretty poor considering how up to date I supposedly am meant to be with the news. But he said he wasn't aware of anything, and truth be told, I wasn't. You read this article from The Guardian, dated the 18th of March, and you realise it's not actually down to any sort of deregulation post-Brexit. It's down to the UK's weak labour laws, which P&O, by the looks of things, did breach anyways. But yeah, we'll have a look at this article and a few others. So to the layperson, the unceremonious sacking of 800 P&O ferry workers may look like a consequence of Britain leaving the EU, which a lot of people did think, especially because French workers for P&O weren't sacked, but that's because French laws around redundancies are far different to UK ones. And that was both pre-Brexit and post-Brexit. And I've saw people, tweet this stuff. You know exactly who I'm talking about. The sorts of people who won't do any fact checking, will see a tweet or a comment, or retweet it for likes without doing any fact checking. I'm also guilty of this. I'm not gonna lie. So with any legal action by the trade unions turning into the first big test of workers' rights post Brexit. So from what I've read, they didn't consult the unions. The P&O boss, by the looks of it, seems to admit this. P&O, we chose not to consult with the unions. This is a video we'll be watching in a bit. I'm a bit wary about how long this video will be, but, stick with me here for the important bits, at least in this article. So despite Boris Johnson's assurances that Britain's departure from the EU would be better for UK workers, there have been fears it would be seen by the government as an opportunity to erode workers' rights in a bid to increase competitiveness, i.e., convince businesses to come here via our lower rights. However, the reality is that so far at least, there's been no derogation from EU employment rights, and the scope of any backsliding is limited, and I have not heard of any kind of backsliding or anything so far. If you have, put it in the comments. 100% I'll take an L, but so far I've not seen much. Contained with the Trade and Cooperation Agreement with the EU, there is a non-regression clause under which Britain agreed not to reduce employment rights below the standards, our standards, not EU standards, our standards, British standards, existing on the 31st of December 2020 in a manner that would affect trade or investment. So the UK, under the TCA, cannot do this, because if we do, the EU could take retaliatory tariffs. Or put things in like quotas. So in blue, the EU could take retaliatory measures such as tariffs if trade and investment were affected, and could also legally challenge the regression before a panel of experts. So if this panel of experts say, look, because of this UK regression in these laws, it's resulted in an increase of investment from other countries or businesses or wherever, the EU can put tariffs or quotas in, no problems. So this paragraph in yellow, or this statement in yellow, tells also where that person got their information from. I don't know. I'm not going to mention their name. I'm not going to create more drama for the channel as I've done previously. But if you do see that person's video or have seen it, ask them for a source. Ask them for a source. Ask them where they read it. That's the most important thing. Anything you hear me say that you're unsure about, I'll do my best to provide the source for it. John Bowers, QC, a leading employment barrister and principal of Barrisnoes College, Oxford, said although the government huffed and puffed about changing the law, so far they haven't. The straightforward statutory redundancy law is purely UK. It's the redundancy consultation law that is EU related. We haven't changed that. We haven't changed much around it. Andrea London, a partner in law firm Winkerth Sherwood's employment team, said Brexit was a red herring. She said the EU Collective Redundancies Directive was implemented in the UK by a primary act of Parliament, which gold-plated went beyond the EU legislation. Because let's not forget here, the EU set the minimum standards, the minimum requirements, not the maximum. You can go for EU minimum standards or you can go for higher standards. That's up to you. But it's only the lowest standard that's set by the EU. Basement. she said that given its longevity and trade union backing, is firmly entrenched in the UK employment law environment, and there inevitably would be considerable opposition to any repeal or paring back of the protections in this law due to leaving the EU. And it'll also go back to this area here where the EU can say, look, you've decided to do deregulation in workers' rights, we're going to take you to court, or we're going to stick quotas on you. That's why the EU have put this in the TCA. When there were reports denied by the government that proposals were being considered to lower employment rights, those plans did not mention redundancy rights, but rather an end to the 48-hour maximum working week, which is something that you can opt out of if you want to as a worker, but doing more than 48 hours in a week is just madness. Changes to rules about breaks at work, and removing overtime pay when calculating certain holiday pay entitlements. So the UK are looking at these things to deregulate, but not anything in terms of how easy it is to sack people. Where Brexit has had its impact is in the courts, although its effect will be limited. When the UK was a member of the EU, the country's highest appeal court could ask for the European Court of Justice for an opinion on how to interpret EU law, but post-Brexit it will no longer be able to do this for employment cases, nor most cases. Only Northern Ireland, I think, could go to the EU's highest court, but for court cases now, it will go to the UK's highest court, which should be the Supreme Court. Regardless, the chances of this case going to the Supreme Court seem remote at this stage, if it is a straightforward matter of legally of the company not having consulted with workers prior to redundancies, unless there is a dispute over the jurisdiction of the employment contracts, because this company is more of an international company, and the owner of this company is one of the Arab Gulf states, monarchs, I believe. Bowers said what had happened was not a result of Brexit, but of insufficient legal protection. And these are experts in employment law. These are people who are way above my pay grade and intelligence, miles above, that are saying these things. So where that person found their source, I don't know. This person, Bauer, said, the only remedy is a monetary one, he said. What there really should be is an injunction to stop people being dismissed without consultation, which is meant to happen. The companies are meant to go to the union and say, look, this situation, we have to get rid of X amount of workers for these reasons. Here's redundancy money, which P&O have now offered. This article... Oh, sorry, this is not the one. This is the one from the 22nd. So we know P&O decided to sack their workers last week. And then this week they offered £36.5 million in compensation, which is ironic that this company could offer so much money in compensation, considering that they're saying their current model is not viable. Where the hell are you getting £36.5 million from them, big man? But that's a key question. I don't think there's anything more specific I want to talk about in this article, but you can see there is compensation being offered, but the union should have been consulted on this. The government are considering their contracts with the ferry firm, but depending on who's been paid and whatever, it's unlikely. But I know from what I've read, the Scottish government are also reviewing the contracts as well. In terms of redundancy, the workers weren't given notice periods. So the statutory redundancy notice periods are at least 1 week's notice if employed between 1 month and 2 years, 1 week's notice for each year if employed between 2 and 12 years, and 12 weeks notice if employed for 12 years or more. And from what we've read, P&O did not give any notice time to the workers. They just said in a video call, you're done, go home, you're done, pack your bags, go home, you're done, effectively. And so for people who think it is Brexit, it's down to the employment laws of individual countries. So this article here is about why did P&O Ferries axe UK jobs but keep as French workers. Now it could be that P&O have said they fired seafaring staff because that's where they could save money by paying people way less. But also the fact that French worker laws are far more stringent and politicians are more likely to get involved in this. So on Thursday, French media reported staff representatives in France saying they were not affected by the announcement of P&O sacking staff. The company says in total it employed 3,000 people, including 800 UK staff who had lost their jobs. These are mainly seafaring staff. The remaining staff are made up of office-based UK roles. The redundancy is only affecting seafaring staff and staff in France, Ireland and the Netherlands, so they weren't impacted by this by the looks of it. So what about French staff? The statement from P&O doesn't mention any further job losses, but it's clear that the company is in trouble, so it cannot be ruled out. And we don't know how in trouble these companies are really, because they're run by parent companies and things like that. So you can easily take the profits out of one, stick it in another, that's offshore typically, and then claim your main businesses are making a loss. French workers enjoy greater protection than their British colleagues thanks to the the French Labour Code, right? And what you can see here is not a difference because of the EU, but a difference in nation states. Because even as an EU member, the UK had far lower worker rights than the French. So is that because of the EU? No, it's because of individual governments. French redundancies. Concerning redundancies, the code first sets requirements that the business must fulfill in order to make employees redundant. If the redundancies are for economic reasons, which P&O are claiming in this case, the company must be able to demonstrate a drop in orders or turnover for a minimum period for businesses with more than 300 employees. P&O. The loss must be over 4 consecutive quarters. That would be a year, 4 quarters a year. So they would have to show that they've been making huge losses for over a year. The company must then select employees for redundancy and must take into account factors like seniority, so people who have higher kind of hierarchical status within the company, and family burden. So, for example, if someone has no kids and someone else has, like, say, 2 kids, the person with no kids might face the sack rather than the family person, which for altruistic reasons makes sense, but also a bummer if you don't have kids or a family. Once selected, the company must then demonstrate that it has looked for a different position within the company for the employee. That is important because if this step is not followed, then the employee can claim unfair dismissal. If the company has an employee representative group or unions, these two must be involved in the process. And we know P&O did not include, by the looks of things, people in the unions in their decision to fire staff, but the UK government did have advance notice. Where large numbers of employees are being made redundant, local political representatives would also be involved. If the company has a collective agreement, which most large companies do, I think these are more prominent in countries like Norway. This may cover processes around redundancy, so if the company was going to fire people, they would have to follow a set process, not like P&O did in this case. The company must then follow a strict process, which includes calling a meeting with 5 days notice, which the British workers didn't get, offering retraining programs, then sending written notification of redundancy with at least 7 days notice. And we know in the UK's case, some of these are kind of similar with the notice periods. P&O's practice of calling the same day meeting and then telling employees via video they were immediately out of work clearly meets none of the conditions for process. What a company does next is also important. If employees are made redundant on the grounds of economic difficulty, but then new workers are quickly hired to fill the same roles, the original employee may have a case for unfair dismissal, and this is the key here. If the dismissal is found to be unfair by the Labour Court, then the employee is entitled to damages. There is no legal maximum for these damages, especially when you can talk about the mental strain it has, losing your job, having to look for other work, etc. These costs can rack up a lot. And in the UK, when it comes to redundancies, there is a set notice period, and they've got things for redundancy as well. The issue is that with the P&O redundancies, by the looks of it, these payouts look to include non-disclosure agreements, which I'm sure the unions wouldn't really support. And if we watch this video here of this person facing a grilling here from a select committee, it's brutal stuff here, absolute fatality.
Did P&O have a duty to consult the unions in good time over the redundancies pursuant to Section 188 of the Trade Union Act of 1992?
So there's absolutely no doubt that we were required to consult with the unions. We chose not to do that because we believe...
You chose to break the law?
Because we chose not to consult, and we will will compensate everybody in full for that. I recognise...
So this is a key test of UK employment law because they're admitting they did not consult the unions. That's important.
That this is a really
When you get in your car and drive down the motorway and you see the 70-mile-an-hour sign, do you decide that that's not going to apply to me? I'm going to do 90 because I think it's important that I do that. Is that how you go about your life?
No.
No, it isn't. Did the collective agreements in place between P&O and RMT and Nautilus provide for negotiation over such matters as redundancies?
Sorry, could you rephrase the question?
You had collective agreements.
Correct.
With RMT and Nautilus. That provides for negotiation over such matters as redundancies. You've done it before. Why didn't you do it? What was the moral justification for you not doing that?
So that's a key question. They had these collective bargaining things in place, and kind of not a precedent, but an agreement around redundancies.
Okay, so these are very extreme circumstances. In order to answer that question fully, can I explain the difference between the operational model that we previously had and the one that we are moving to, so that you understand how fundamental a change it is, and that helps me explain why we had to take the route
He's going to waffle. He's going to waffle now.
To take. Would you allow me to
Sorry,
do that?
as the chair has already pointed out, there's many companies that have difficulties. They obey the law and they consult with their members through their trade unions. You haven't done that.
We've moved from one operating model to another. And
You haven't escaped the law of this country. You've still got to do it within the legal framework. You can't just decide that you're going to absent yourself from the legal system of the United Kingdom.
so it was our assessment that the change was of such a magnitude that no union could possibly accept our proposal.
Oh, you're right.
So what he's saying is, this change was so big that the unions would never have accepted this, hence why we did not speak to the unions. What they were better off doing is going to the unions, giving this proposal, the unions declining it, and then saying, look, we tried to agree something with the unions and we failed in talks. This is a huge test for the UK, honestly, because other companies are going to be looking at this thinking, we can just bypass the unions and, come up with our own redundancy numbers and whatever and get away with this. Especially with the advent of non-disclosure agreements where if workers do go out and do actually talk about what's happened, they could lose their redundancy money.
It's about that, Mr. Cummings. I've never heard such farcical answers to a series of questions. Okay, can I move on, Chair?
So he's admitted it.
Our proposal.
Oh, you're right about that, Mr. Cummings.
No union could possibly accept our proposal.
Oh, you're right
That's just madness. He's openly said that. That's absolutely insane.
about that, Mr. Cummings.
This is their chief executive as well, not him, obviously, the other guy. He's the chief executive by the looks of it.
I've never heard such farcical answers to a series of questions. Okay, can I move on, Chair? In selecting UK employees, most of whom will be UK nationals or residents, when you selected them for dismissal, P&O has evidently discriminated against them on grounds of nationality. What was the legal justification for doing this?
I don't know if it was just British nationals they sacked, or I suppose it'd be people in Britain, not necessarily like English people or white British people, if that makes sense.
So to be clear, actually these weren't exclusively UK nationals. They were largely UK nationals, but this was a group of international employees.
So what are the new rates of pay to be offered to the new crews? How much are you paying them?
So the two models are very different. So to answer that question is a bit more complicated, if you can allow me the time.
And these people have been absolutely screwed over here. It's just madness.
The previous operating model required us to have 4 crews for every ship on Dover-Calais. The new operating model requires us to have 2 crews and pay people when they work.
So essentially what he's saying is we're going to cut the amount of people we have on each ship. That would thus save them money and also only pay them when they work, so not pay them for the actual journey, like whilst they're on the boat, because they can't really do much else, really, if you're not on working hours. So it's just madness that they've come out and had to fire this many people when, if they effectively they have cut staffing numbers of when people are working.
So they're assessed in slightly different ways. The answer to your question is that the average Jersey seafarer was paid £36,000.
That's about the national average, I think, for people who are like salaries.
And will receive £46,500, so a year and a third in compensation. So that's part of the answer to the question. The second part of the question is, what are the hourly rates of pay for the new model? So the average hourly rate of pay is £5.50. On top of that, there is a pension contribution, there is food and accommodation.
I mean, pension contribution is something they legally have to do. In terms of food, I mean, where are they going to go? You can't buy a £3 meal deal on a goddamn ferry. Jesus, man.
That's more than minimum wage.
And then, sorry, can I make a couple of points, please? So on the routes that are international routes that are governed by ITF standards, we are paying above ITF minimum wages. And on our domestic route, which I think was referenced earlier, Lanka and Ryan, where we are governed by national minimum wage, of course we are paying national minimum wage.
And
It's only the areas where they govern, so kind of the because of like international waters and things like that, this makes it very difficult to enforce certain rules. But I think that he's trying to say that where the boats are in kind of UK's jurisdiction, they will pay minimum wage, but not when they are. I mean, this is a joke, honestly.
And so the seafarers aboard the vessels that are leaving Dover, the replacement crew, they're going to be paying on average, paid at the rate of £5.50 per hour.
Yes.
That's below the national minimum wage of this country. How do you reconcile that?
Where we are governed by national minimum wage, we will absolutely pay national minimum wage.
Oh.
This is an international seafaring model that is consistent with models throughout the globe and our competitors.
Could you live on it, Mr. Heppelthwaite, £5.50 an hour? Could you sustain your lifestyle on £5.50 an hour?
I mean, to be fair, that's a fine argument, but if we asked MPs, could they sustain their lifestyles off £7.50 or £8, whatever the minimum wage is, they'll answer no, without expenses as well. So, I mean, this is a good question, but MPs do open themselves up here by asking such questions.
No, you couldn't, could you? Why do you expect people who've got such responsible jobs to be able to do that? How do you expect them to be able to feed their families and pay their bills at £5.50 an hour?
So
I mean, the other thing is they're going to have to, the people that work on these ships, right, they're going to have to live in the area somewhere. Like, they're going to have to live in Europe. So getting, people from, far away from here, they're going to have to move here. So how are they supposed to live? Maybe it's a better question than I thought.
Very, very important points here.
Yes, because one's called gas, one's called electric. Those are the important points. They can't pay their bills.
One couple of important points, please. The seafarers who join us are international professional seafarers with all the international certification. These are experienced seafarers.
I'm going to move on.
And you're going to pay them below minimum wage. Sick one, bro. So once again, we're going to go back to this point here, which is that it's not about it's not about EU law. If we rejoin the EU tomorrow, it would not fix this problem. The problem is UK law. And so for those people who think, it's because of Brexit, not everything is to do with Brexit. Like, please understand this. A lot of the issues we have is down to individual governments making stupid decisions, specifically the Tories. Specifically them. And, they could have stopped this stuff before, but they chose not to. For anyone, especially, the madness of the unions thinking like the Tories would fix, workers' rights. Like, no, they would deregulate at every opportunity they could. Why? Because they don't care for workers' rights. They don't. Any area where it's not politically damaging to them, they would happily deregulate, because that's who they are, the party of the rich, the owner class. So for the unions, I mean, it's just absolute madness, but I want to see more for the Labour Party on this front as well. But for that person who made the video, if you made it this far and you've watched their content, ask them for a source. I'm not going to go after them. I don't want to create more drama on the channel. But the simple fact is, here's my source. Here in yellow, The Guardian's my source here. This written by Harun Siddiq. He makes this point in yellow, which is the UK cannot backtrack on its workers' regulations without fear of penalty from the EU. So for anyone to argue that this happened because of Brexit simply has no idea what they're talking about on this subject. But that's just my opinion. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.